Hey everyone, Mac here for another beginner to aquariums video. Uh, so this one's going to cover some of the equipment that you're going to need for the tank that you've selected. Now if you've picked a tank that is a kit, it's probably going to come with some of this stuff. Or if you've decided to piece together and get different types of equipment and you don't like the stuff that came in the kit, you may piece one together. So these are some things that you're going to need to get your tank up and running. Now this is for freshwater. I've got a saltwater tank here, but this is primarily for a beginner that's new to the hobby, doesn't know anything about the hobby, but is very interested in setting up an aquarium, but they want to know what you're going to need. Again, I recommend going freshwater because the investment's going to be a lot lower. The fish are going to be a lot more inexpensive, and you're still going to learn a lot about the hobby. And then if you decide this is for me and you want to do something down the road with saltwater, you absolutely can jump into that. So if you've never had a tank, this video is for you. If you've got a tank, you may want to go find some other entertaining video to watch, because this is probably going to bore you. So the first thing that you're going to want is a light. Now there's three types of lights that you need to be considering based on your tank of choice. The first one is designed for fish only. There's not going to be much requirements that you're going to need. It's just going to be a basic light, turn on, turn off. Not much more than that. It's just going to illuminate the tank so you can see what's going on inside. This pertains to both freshwater and saltwater. So if you do a fish only saltwater tank, you just need a basic light. You don't need a lot of bells and whistles and lots of fanciness. Basically just need it to turn on and turn off. The next type of light that you may consider if you're going to do a planted aquarium, a freshwater planted aquarium, you're going to want a light that's better suited to grow those plants. Not any old light's going to do. You want one that's more designed to replicate the spectrum that the plants need to grow. The third one would be for corals. Again, you want the spectrum, par, per, all that. You want to be within certain ranges so you can properly grow those corals, whichever type of coral you want. I'm not going to go into all of that. There's way better videos out there that are very technical. BRS has in their 160 gallon build, they go over lighting on reefs very beautifully, and I think they did a fantastic job at explaining it. So if you're interested in that, go check out that video. So the lights are, for the most part, we're just going to stick with a fish only tank. So pretty much any light will do. Now when I first started, fluorescent bulbs were just kind of starting to take real good hold in the aquarium world, much like LEDs are right now. It was still fairly new. Prior to that, we were using basically metal halide bulbs, or a bulb that you would get at the store with the filament inside. So we've come a long way in lighting technology. You can now get LED lights that can wirelessly connect to your smartphone, and you can totally control it from your smartphone, which is mind-blowing to me. That is like, wow. So you don't have to spend a whole lot on a light, especially if you're getting into the tank world and you're not sure if this is right for you yet or not. It is definitely something to consider. You don't have to do metal halides. That's really more for saltwater tanks, and even that's starting to wane. a little bit, not entirely, but as LEDs are getting better and better and better, some of this older lighting technology is starting to phase out, and the LED lights have dropped a lot in price. So lights can range from $30–40 on up to thousands of dollars, depending on the bells and whistles that you're going for. Let's just stick with the basic light. Most likely, if you bought a kit, it's going to have a light with it, and you're not really going to have to worry a whole lot. If you want, you can buy a timer for the light. Most basic lights don't come with a timer. You can purchase one that does have a built-in timer, so you can kind of have a turn on, turn off kind of thing all by itself, and you don't have to mess with it. If you don't go that route and you just get a basic light, simply when you wake up in the morning, turn the tank on. When you go to bed at night, turn the tank off. I'm a firm believer that everything has a cycle. As in nature, the sun goes down, the moon comes out. It should get dark. Turn the lights off in your tank. Give your fish time to rest. They will be less stressed, and you'll have a happier tank. That is my belief. Some people like to leave their lights on 24 hours. Personally, I don't. Also, that's going to minimize algae growth if you actually turn the lights off and don't leave them on 24 hours a day. So that's the first piece of the puzzle. And the next piece that you want to get is a filter. So there's three things to look at when getting or three filtration aspects that you want to consider. The first one, I should say the three are mechanical, biological, and chemical. And I'll kind of go over and touch base with those three. So mechanical. Basically, you're running the water through some kind of filter media, or I shouldn't say filter media, but like a flossy type media, and that's going to collect the big particles of fish waste and uneaten food, and it's going to trap them. When you go to do a filter change and you pull out the filter, you're going to see this brown, gooky nastiness. That is what that's designed to do, is to trap that stuff and not let it get back into the tank, or it's going to break down and cause problems. But you definitely need to replace the filters. You got to put a clean filter in, otherwise you're just not gonna, your tank's gonna go bad. It's gonna go south very quickly. So regular maintenance is a key with filtration. The second piece of the puzzle with filtration is biological, and that means bacteria. So as food breaks down and the fish waste breaks down, you have basically a nitrogen cycle where you get ammonia. Ammonia happens in the tank. The bacteria breaks that down into something that's less toxic to the fish. So you want the bacteria. Now, bacteria is going to be everywhere in your tank. It's going to be in the gravel. It's going to be on any decorations that you put in there. It's going to be in the filter. It's going to be everywhere. This is not a bad thing. This is a good thing. You want that bacteria in there. So the more bacteria you have, the better. Now, how do you get the bacteria in there? Well, you can buy products that are cultured bacteria, and it's in a liquid form, and you just pour the recommended amount into your tank. That's going to help start it. There's upsides to it, there's downsides to it, just like everything in the aquarium world. Do research on it, decide if you just want to let the tank naturally get bacteria from the air. You certainly can. The third one is chemical, and that's exactly how it sounds. You're using some kind of chemical process to remove the contaminants in your tank. The most common form of this is carbon. Not all carbon is created equal, so do research. Some of these pre-made filters for these pre-made filter bags that go inside your filters, you're kind of stuck with them. But there's ways around that. Not going to get into the DIY of that, but you can certainly research that down the road if you like. But the chemical or the carbon in there is going to trap the smaller particles. So you've got your mechanical one that's going to trap all the big pieces. The pieces that filter through that are going to be trapped by the carbon, and that's going to be your smaller particles, along with some smaller contaminants, and it's going to clarify your water really, really good. So those are your three pieces. Now for fresh water, there's a few choices out there. Okay, there's a lot of choices out there. I'm going to cover some of the 6 most common filtration choices out there. I'm going to start with the worst ones to the better choices. Some of the worst ones, or ones that especially if you've got a little bit larger tank, we're just going to go with you chose a 20-gallon tank. So some of the worst ones, in my opinion, are sponge air-driven filters. Now these typically sit inside your tank and they draw water through a sponge and then eject the water out through like a top nozzle or something that you might be able to move around a little bit. Now the downside to this is all that waste stays inside your tank and doesn't go anywhere, and the theory is that the bacteria will sit on the sponge and do its job. In theory, yes, it works, but when you grab that sponge to take it off, you're going to release some of that gunk back into your tank. I think they're just terrible. Stay away from those. You're better off. Probably, in my opinion, the absolute worst filter to get is an under gravel filter. Now, I mentioned it in another video. When I started, it was the only filter choice you had. You had under gravel filter, that was it. Fast forward when I started working at the pet store, and I walked in the fish shop for the first time and I saw all these different filters. I was like, what? What are these? These look cool. I was just amazed at the technology that had come out in such a short period of time. So hang on the backs are probably the better choice. But under gravel filters are bad, and what happens is they're exactly what you're hearing, under gravel filter. So if you see your gravel here, so imagine this is gravel, your filter would be underneath that. Now the idea was that your water would be pulled down through the gravel, out towards a side, up through like a bubbler, out through a filter cartridge, and then back into the tank. Again, you would get it through the bacteria that would be in your substrate down into the bottom part, which usually had about a gap, probably about yay big or so, and then was supposed to flow back around. Problem was the gravel would impede the flow so much that it wouldn't filter properly. It was never enough flow through the tank. Unless you put like some massive bubbler on there, it was never enough flow. So what happened was all the fish waste would go through the gravel, would sit, and would work its way down and would get trapped either in the gravel or just below into the bottom part of the tank where that gap was, and would never get filtered back into where your actual filters were, which were typically in the corners of the tank, in the form of a clear tube with an air stone in it. It would bubble up, and then you had a little cartridge that would fit on the end of the top of that. 9 times out of 10, what would happen is you would have an ammonia buildup at the bottom of this tank, and it would just slowly build up, slowly build up, slowly build up, and then it would just, boom, it would toxify the whole tank, and all of your fish would be belly up in no time. It would just nuke the tank. It happened to me. It is not fun. Stay away from under gravel filters. They are the worst filters out there, and surprisingly, they still make them. I don't know why. I really don't. They're the worst filters. Stay away from them. Another bad filter, especially on a larger aquarium, 20 gallons or bigger, would be an internal filter. Now these are more designed for a small tank where you can't put a canister filter or hang on the back filter on the back. That's about what they're good for. In a larger tank, they're not going to be very useful, so just stay away from those. So the top 3 would be a hang on the back, a canister, or a sump or wet dry filter, something like that. So a hang on the back is exactly how it sounds. It's usually a small box that would hang on the back of your aquarium. It's got an intake tube. You plug it in. It's got a little electric motor with a magnetized impeller unit that draws the water from your aquarium into the chamber in the back, run it through a filter medium of some kind, and then return back into the tank. My opinion, these are probably the most common and widely used filters in fresh water. Canister filters are probably the second most used filtration ones. They kind of operate the same. You've got a tall canister that sits outside of your aquarium. You run a line that draws water from your aquarium down through the canister, through the filter media. The impeller unit pushes the water out through another area of the canister and back into your tank. Kind of like what I've got here, although this is not a canister filter. So you would have water that would drain, go through the filtration process, and then be returned through an intake line like that one over there. That's basically how those work. The downside to a canister one is when you go to change out the filter, put it into a bucket first. You can easily spill water. I've seen people forget to unplug them while they are changing the filter media and have a flood on their floor. That is a pretty good downside to them. So, there's some things to remember when you're messing with one of those. And then the last one, the wet dry or a sump feature. Sumps are typically on larger tanks where hang on the backs and canisters can no longer support the minimum required flow to the aquarium to keep the animals alive. So they're more designed on much larger tanks, but I have seen them on small 20-gallon tanks. So pick the filter that is right for you. Typically the hang on the back ones are going to be the least expensive and easiest to maintain. Canisters are going to be a little bit higher in price, and the wet dry or sump filtration is going to be the most expensive. So for this beginner tutorial, I would suggest go with the hang on the back filtration. So some other equipment that you're going to want that may be in your kit. If you bought a kit, if you're piecing it together, you definitely want to get this stuff. Things like a net. If you got a dead fish, you got to get it out. Easiest way is a net. Buy a net. And there's another use for it down the road, and I will explain that in a later video. Test kits. You want a test kit. You want to know what your water's doing. For fresh water, things like ammonia, pH, those are very big things that you want to test for. Nitrates, nitrites, definitely big things you want to consider testing for. Thermometer. Thermometers are good gauges to know if your heater is working properly. So you'll definitely need a heater for your tank. My recommendation on heaters, buy 2 of them. Why buy 2 of them? Well, heaters over time will fail. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. I've gone through, I think, 3 heaters on this particular tank. They just wear out. They just break down, they wear out. It happens. If you have a backup, you can easily fix the problem immediately. If you don't have a backup and it's late in the evening and your local fish store is closed, you are going to have to wait until the next day that they open up to get a new heater. That could be too long. Buy a backup. This way, if you've got a problem, you can get it fixed immediately. The next day you can go buy your new backup. So there's 3 things that can typically happen with a heater. The light could be on, but the heating element is burnt out, so therefore it is not producing any heat. Or the whole thing's just toast and it just doesn't ever come back on. Or it stays on and heats up your tank. All 3 are bad. So how do you know if your temperature's not right? You have a thermometer. Personally, I like the kind that stick to the front of the tank. They're usually pretty easy to read. There's mine right there. I have another one, but my cat kind of destroyed it as she was enjoying the tank. But I still have that one over there. I put one in each of the 2 corners on the front of the tank so I can take immediately quick readings, and I will know if there's a problem in the tank. As far as like the temperature, the last time I had one was about a year ago, roughly, a little over a year ago, and we had our furnace went out in our house, and it was very, very cold in the house. Now the ambient room temperature was drawing all of the heat out of the tank. It was just sucking the heat out of the tank. So my heater was working overtime. It was constantly on, trying to keep up with the temperature, and it pretty much burned out the element inside. It just stayed on. It could never keep the tank warm enough. So the heating element pretty much burned out, and I noticed that my temperature was getting low. It wasn't dangerously low, but it was getting to that point. Luckily, I caught it during the day when I could get to a local fish store. I bought a new heater, threw it in there, got the tank back up to temperature, and I didn't lose anything. So had I had a backup here, I could have saved myself a whole lot of problems. I could have just put the backup in and would have been fine. Things happen to tanks. Things just happen. Having a backup of a heater is not a bad option. It's something to very much consider. Some other stuff to consider getting would be like a dechlorinator. So when you're adding your water to the tank, you want to get that chlorine and chloramines out of the water. Best way to do that is a liquid dechlorinator, and that will instantly neutralize the chlorine and make it safe for your fish. So definitely get that. Probably want to consider getting some kind of pH adjuster. So when you're researching the fish, trying to determine what you're going to put in your tank, find out what pH they like, the pH range. It can be anywhere from like a 6.8 on up to probably like a 7.5 in freshwater. You might have some fish that are outside of those ranges. Cichlids, or not cichlids, I'm sorry, discus, are very much like the more acidic waters. Some of the other fish, you can probably go more of a 7 to 7.2 and not have any problems with them. So research what the fish that you want and what kind of pH range they have. Now, when you get your test kit, test the tap water for pH. See where your tap water is. You might be surprised where your tap water is. Mine's very, very high. It's probably, I think the last time I tested it, it was somewhere around 8.5 to 9. This was very alkaline, which isn't a problem for salt water, but in a freshwater setting, that is way too high and my fish would not survive. End of story. So I bought some pH adjuster that brought it down to 7.0, and the fish that I was keeping, they were within that range, and I usually had pretty good success. Every once in a while a fish would die, and you know, whether it was from natural causes or stress, you know, I don't know. It's hard to say on a small half-inch neon tetra what could have caused their demise. But for the most part, I never had any issues. As long as I dechlorinated it, did the pH adjustment, and then added the water to the tank, and I never really had any issues with that. So I think that's going to be about it for this part of the video series. Again, this one went a little longer than I anticipated, but I hope I'm getting some good information to you guys and some knowledge that will help you enjoy your tank if you decide to jump into this hobby. It can be fun, it can be rewarding, you can have a lot of fun. If you've got kids, they can learn a lot life lessons from an aquarium. And most kids really enjoy aquariums. So there you go. The next video I plan on doing is going to be on substrate and decorations and some do's and don'ts when it comes to that. And then after that we'll go into some other aspects. So stay tuned. You know, I might get all these videos up today, so that way you can go through the whole thing, and hopefully as a beginner that's never touched a fish tank, you will have the confidence and the knowledge, or enough knowledge to get you started and down a good path. Alright, well, I'll see you in the next video. Later.